Good morning.
Well, good morning. Good morning, all. Now, if you can be on camera, you want to be on camera. If you can't be on camera, that I understand, but if we were doing a live class, you'd have to show up.
We want to see your face.
Well, we want you to participate, yes, but that's part of it. It's really more of a mindset that if you're on camera, and again, it's fine, like if you're not ready or something, but going forward, when you're actually in class, I mean, you got to get dressed, you got the stuff you got to do, right? Which psychologically is playing some role in this. So, and it's just easier on me if I'm like looking at faces instead of blank boxes. I mean, I'm like, hello. So, well, hi, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, come on, give me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
If we're successful, you're going to practice law the rest of your lives, right? So come on, get with it, will you? Losers.
Well, I have some news, Peter.
Okay, and that is?
Well, Thursday at 8:20 p.m., I was able to do the writing sample. Yesterday, I made an attempt to do the LSAT. And although that wasn't completely successful, due to technical difficulties, at least the writing sample has been approved.
Good. And what happened with the LSAT?
It had more to do with ProctorU than anything else.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
It's not necessarily the friendliest organization or the most organized organization, but we'll try it again. Not a problem.
Are you rescheduling for a different exam or just taking this later on?
Well, after you fill out the complaint form, they'll give you it was a test day issue. And so August 23 is, I have to talk to them, but August 23 may be an option.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're talking September.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so welcome. And again, nobody has to be here. So I want you guys to say, because so much of this is your attitude and your effort. So much of this is, because a lot of stuff we can get through without attitude and effort. If you're naturally gifted at something, you're naturally gifted at something. But what's going on here in this test is you really do have to think like a lawyer. And, you said, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to think like a lawyer? Well, that's what the LSAT tests. And it can be explained, I think. And what the LSAT's doing is just, it's just measures your natural ability to think this way. Some folks they just naturally reason this way. And this way is IRAC, right? It's issue, rule, analysis, or application and conclusion. That's our world, right? And that's going to be your world when you come in. And so some people that's the way they reason, that's just what they do. And for other people, it's not, but it can be learned. It's not that big a deal unless you get in your own way, and then it's a very big deal. So this really is about law and the LSAT. It's all about words. And in regular life, we have filters. So like you read certain words with a different filter than the person to the left of you, to the person to the right of you, the person above you, the person below you on the screen. You're reading the same words, but you may not be receiving the same message. So law is about an understanding of that this is all about words. And we're going to, I think today, I want to get into the logical reasoning section, just get you started. Don't try to do everything at once. You need to understand the test. You know, if you don't understand what the test is doing, it's hard to do well in the test. You know, you could be really gifted, but if you don't know what they want from you, then you don't know what to give them. So as I have gone through this, right, the thing that messes most people up, there are some real factors here. So make no mistake about it. There are some things that are in your control and some things that are not. Your academic infrastructure really is not in your control. If you know what I'm saying, if you have gone through schools, and again, I went to City University, I went to Lehman College, which is part of the City University of New York. And I didn't attend most of my classes in college. Yeah. Your academic infrastructure is what it is, and you need to be aware of that. You can change it over time, right? But if you're reading on a 12th grade level, that you're reading on a 12th grade level, right? And that's going to be a problem in law school. If you're reading on a law school level, well, you know, then it's not going to be a problem. So part of this is really just coming to an understanding of where are you. If you're reading on a 12th grade level, it doesn't mean you can't go to law school, but it does imply, in other words, if I say words, so if I say the word problematic, would it be fair to say that some of us might understand that word and some of us might never have heard that word? Is that fair to say? Talk to me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And if I use the term stare decisis, is it fair to say you're probably, most of you are not familiar with that term?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
It's all about words. Okay. And stare decisis is a term that you're going to be introduced to in law school. So if I say nisi prius, is it fair to say most of you are not going to be familiar with the term nisi prius?
No.
Yes.
Okay. And you're not supposed to, because that's for law school. So do you get, when you go to law school, if you can't wrap your arms around these new terms, you're toast?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Talk to me.
Yes.
Okay. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to be a lawyer, because I'd be doing something else. But what I'm saying to you is, by analogy, the LSAT has sort of a similar standard. It's going to present you with language, with words, that either the context is different or you're just unfamiliar with it, because the nature of what you've been exposed to perhaps hasn't been as robust as it could have been. So the word problematic comes up quite a bit on the LSAT. It just means it's a problem. But if you don't know that, it's gonna mess with you. So the way you prepare for the LSAT is by immersing yourself in the LSAT, because the language is repeated. There's nothing to memorize. All you're going to do is change the way you to think is to reason. So whether I say you're going to change the way you think or change the way you reason, I'm saying the same thing. This is all about reasoning. It is not about your politics. There are lots of lawyers who voted for Donald Trump. There are lots of lawyers who voted for Joe Biden. There are lots of lawyers, well, fewer now because we're getting old, but lots of lawyers who may have voted for Ronald Reagan, and lots of lawyers who voted for Barack Obama. You'll end up in this world, and you'll end up probably coming to the conclusion that they're not evil because they didn't do what you did. And they will be reading the same words that you were reading, but on behalf of a different client. And they are bound. Words restrict what we can do. They put boundaries so that when you try to do something with a word or a term that doesn't make sense, well, then, the other side's going to say, but that doesn't make sense. And the judge is going to say, you may want the word to mean this thing, but it can't mean this thing. Good can't mean evil. It just can't. Black can't mean white. It just can't. So understand that words limit what we can do on behalf of the cause that we are embracing or the client that we are representing. We don't get to ignore the words. Okay. So that is most clear in the logical reasoning section, which is where we're going to start. And it's a piece of business. So again, you come here and it's, the word for the LSAT, it's an aptitude test. But an aptitude is something that over time you can acquire. So like, again, in my life, I suspect at this point, there are hundreds of people, because I've been doing this for, 1995. No, 1998. Well, yeah, no, 1995. So what I'm saying is that there are hundreds of people who've come into my life with prior LSAT scores that were not going to get them into law school, right? Who are now lawyers. Now, having said that, there probably are hundreds of people who came into my life who had prior LSAT scores that weren't going to get them into law school, and they didn't go to law school. So a lot of this is in your hands. The aptitude the test is measuring for, right, is simply, can you reason in the way that law school is going to require you to reason? That's all. That's all. Doesn't that kind of make sense? If law school is going to require you to write in a different format, to think in a different format, to express yourself in a certain format, doesn't it make sense that you will need to be able to do that going forward? Come on, talk to me.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm just Peter. You with me? I'm not, my mission, I'm not here to tell you what to think. You think whatever you want. That's not my job. My job is not to make you somebody on the left or somebody on the right. That is not what I'm about. It's not what to think. It's how to think, right? Because once you get this down, once you get how we think, man, it's powerful shit. Right? And it doesn't matter what side of the equation you're on, you possess this ability to think this way, you're going to be an effective advocate. So you take whatever cause you're interested in. And again, I don't really care what cause you're attached to. But wouldn't you want to be effective? Wouldn't you want to be an effective advocate for that cause?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, then you have to do the very same thing your adversary is doing. Because if you don't do what your adversary, in other words, if you don't prepare to reason this way, it's far more about reasoning than it is about passion. You got to have them both, but reasoning is what you're getting paid to do. So again, think of the LSAT as, and again, there's so much, and I'll put up notes, and we'll be discussing it. You got to understand this is a psychometric test. It's not an academic test. You do not approach this test the way you've approached undergraduate school. You don't. So you've been getting A's or whatever you've been getting, and you've been a star pupil. Well, you can throw that right out the window. Because nobody pays me to memorize. Nobody pays any attorney to memorize. In terms of academics, so I've been a lawyer since when the hell? 1987. Yeah, it sounds about right. 1987, right? So I've been a lawyer since before you guys, the vast majority, if not all of you, were born. Now, in that time, I want you to think about how you think. How many occasions in the course of my legal practice has anybody asked me about Hans Morgenthau's theory on international relations, which I'm quite familiar? How many times has a client ever asked me about that?
Never.
Probably none.
Son of a bitch. You mean, but I have this master's degree in international relations. What was the point of that? Now, I know a little bit, not much now. I don't actually know anything, but I am familiar with some economics. Now, I've read quite a bit of Milton Friedman as an economist. On how many occasions do you think my clients have asked me anything about my understandings of Milton Friedman?
Never.
Never. So what was the point of that? And I could go, I love philosophy. And I think Aristotle's function argument is just swell. Gets better with a couple of glasses of wine, but I think it's just swell. On how many occasions do you think my clients have asked me about my view on Aristotle's function argument?
Never.
Right. You get none of that. It can shape you as a person. It can make you more interesting at parties, I suppose. And in academia, it qualifies you, but this is not academia. This is the real world of law. And this test very much mimics the real world of law. So you come in and you say, okay, where are my strengths and where are my weaknesses? You do it with your eyes wide open. So if you're coming into reading comprehension, you have to establish, how steep is this hill? What can I realistically accomplish if I'm going to have 27 questions? Realistically, what am I targeting? I may be targeting a 14. And you say, my God, that's awful. Well, it all depends what awful means, because the 14 may be part of a plan that gets you into law school. But if it's a 14, if that's where you end up, you have to know that. You can't be shooting for a 20 if you're only capable of a 14. So you have to take a self-inventory on each of the three sections, and it's nothing personal. If you suck in something, well, suck less in it. Could you do that? It is what it is. Right now, you can change, you can influence, you can strive, and by all means do, but don't deny. And people don't go to law school because they just can't do that. They just can't wrap their arms around the fact that, you know what, they're not perfect. So that reading comprehension section is going to measure your academic infrastructure. And we'll get into that. That'll be the third class, and we will get into that. Right. The analytical reasoning section is, and again, you can't go to law school. Again, if you can't wrap your arms around, not only in law school are you going to read the word problematic, you're going to read words like, epistemological, you're going to, you're going to read words you have no clue. All right. And that's part of what makes particularly the first year of law school so overwhelming, is you're not even fluent in the bloody English vocabulary. And now they're throwing Latin on top of that. And everything you read is written by a dork. Nothing in law school do you read is written by regular human beings. Like, they're all dorks. And they're writing to other dorks. Judges aren't writing to law school students. So you're not reading anything written to help you. It's so different from college. They paid me to be in front of a room in college. I hesitate to say I taught because I don't know that I can teach. But when I picked a text, that students, I thought, they'll understand this. This helps me help you. The way this person writes, right, is going to help me help you. That's college. That ain't law school. Nobody gives a rat's ass about when they write, helping you, that because that's not the point. They're not writing to you, they're writing to their peers or posterity. So in each section, you have to have a self-assessment. So you're going to have a self-assessment in reading comprehension. And the reason for that, reason that section's there is you cannot survive law school if you don't understand what you're reading. I mean, does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So like if you were developing an entrance exam for law school, wouldn't at least one part of it be, can this person survive when they get in there? Right? And is there anything that prevents you, if in the reading comprehension, you're absolutely getting your ass kicked, and you can identify that, something that's really contributing to that outcome is you're reading on a level lower than the level you need to read. Is there anything that prevents you from spending more time reading? Is there anything that prevents you from improving your reading comprehension skills other than your attitude and motivation? Is there anything that stands in your way but you?
No.
Absolutely not.
So I'm saying we're all in different places. So there's some people going to look at reading comprehension, they just get it. And they'll sit down, they'll say, I'm getting a 23. It's a real pain in the ass because I want a 26, but I'm getting a 23. There are other people who will sit down and get a 6. And so long as it doesn't remain a 6, you can go to law school. But it has to not remain a 6. Right. So each of these areas we're going to be diving into, saying, how do we change this? How do we get you to the place you need to be? And again, this is not about what you want. Nobody cares what you want except you. You see, I want to win the lottery. Who cares? It's like, hello. It's not, forget the word want. I mean, where want intersects with expect, you're fine. In other words, when what you want is what you can expect, you live in the dream. But when what you want exceeds what can be expected, you may be in trouble. So forget this I want. It's I expect, not I want, right? And when you do that and you say, I expect, so on reading comprehension, any section, right? Any section you can say, well, I want to get, 25 out of 27. That's what you want. Okay, so show me. Show me what you can expect. And then show me evidence that the expectation is grounded. This really is approaching this test, right? If you approach it the way a lawyer approaches a case, not the way a college student approaches an exam, the way a lawyer approaches a case. If you do that, you're much more likely to succeed. And you're much more likely to be prepared for the real law school experience you're going to go through, right? So it's like, lose this stuff about what I want. And when you say you expect something, show me the evidence, because that's all law is, evidence. Show me the evidence. I don't want your conclusion. I want your evidence. If your evidence is persuasive, I don't need your conclusion, right? We'll get into what an argument is. An argument is simply facts, evidence. They're all saying, whether you want to say facts or evidence or premise, it all means the same thing. When you think of what an argument is, it's some information that you believe to be factual, and then some conclusion, typically that you infer the conclusion from the facts. Not always, but typically you do. Okay, that doesn't sound terrible. Does that sound terribly complicated? It's not. It's not. But in your world, it's all conclusions. is you're simply, it's an echo chamber. You're simply repeating what somebody has said to you. Well, that doesn't mean what you're saying is valid. It just means you're repeating. I mean, is that a gift to repeat what somebody else wrote, or to repeat what somebody else said, or to repeat what somebody else heard? That's a gift? I'll get over it. Give me your facts. And if your facts are persuasive, I'll adopt the conclusion you have without ever knowing what conclusion you have. That's the business of law. So reading comprehension is there because it has to be there. Something like that has to be there, right? And this should give you incentive to prepare. You know what I'm saying? If you're just thinking of the LSAT it's the dreaded LSAT. It's got nothing to do with law school. I'm going to find some way around this. You're so toast. I mean, again, if you're intuitively gifted, if you just naturally reason this way, you can have that attitude and get past this test. But the vast majority of folks do not naturally think this way. And when you go to law school, you're introduced to it and you're compelled to think this way, right? And that adjustment can be very challenging because you're learning the content. Now you're learning all this new material, which is not building on college. Do not think that because you took a pre-law course or program, or you took a paralegal thing, do not think for a moment that that is the equivalent of what's going to happen in law school. It's a brand new gig. So that's why reading comp is there. I say we'll get to that in class 3. And you're just going to take an honest inventory in each section. And then we're going to work to how do we get you as part of a plan to be where you need to be. And again, it's not about me, you know, but my back, I mean, I'm a trial and appellate attorney. Well, not now, you know, right now I'm just doing this, but my history has been trial and appellate work. And again, nobody's asking me who I voted for. Nobody's asking me what my view of a changing climate is. Nobody's asking me, nor will they ask me whether or not you know, Donald Trump should be in jail or not. It's got nothing to do with this skill. It's saying, okay, here's my objective. So if I'm, you know, trying a case, my objective as a district attorney has been to achieve a conviction. Okay, I know what my objective is, right? And say, how do I achieve that? Well, any number of paths that I'm looking at that can achieve it. And some are more convenient and more direct, and some are less convenient and more indirect. And some require less work and some require more work. And it is what it is. It is, I'm going to do what I have to do case by case to achieve my objective. It's not what I want, it's what I can expect. So maybe I want, and I have wanted, to try cases as murder. But maybe the facts of that case are that I don't see the conviction. I feel the outrage, right? But I don't see the conviction. So it's not what I want. It's what I can expect. And then I build a case to my expectation and whatever is required. So again, it's not, if, you know, I tried an arson case. I didn't know anything about arson when I tried an arson case. So it's not really fair, right? Because that arson case could have been assigned to some other attorney who had a background, you know, who knew stuff about arson. I just know arson's a fire. Right. So the fact that you're not on equal footing with somebody else doesn't mean you're not going to achieve the objective you set out. Right. So think of this as a piece of business and as an opportunity really to prepare for law school and to be a lawyer, far more importantly. And you're no longer an activist. You're now in litigation. You're now in preparation. You with me? You're now all about facts. And facts are really inconvenient things because they just get in the way. Well, for lawyers, that's our lifeblood. And the most important fact is the fact that I don't know exists, or the fact that's contrary to my view, because those are the ones I don't want to hear. So there's no way you can be in this business and simply blow somebody else off as they voted for Trump. Maybe they did. That doesn't mean a damn thing to me. So let me take you to the analytical reasoning. Don't call it logic games. There's no section on this test that's called logic games. And logic games, I don't know what that is. I guess it's a game that has something to do with formal logic. This is all about language. And when you control, why do you think there are two groups, each of whom modify one word with the word pro? So why do you think you're pro-choice or pro-life? Why do you think the word pro is in there? Talk to me. Does the word pro give a positive spin on whatever word will follow? Talk to me.
Yes.
Does it place whatever will follow in a favorable light? Talk to me.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, so here are opposing sides using language to put something in the most positive light.
Mhm.
Well, that's our world, and that's the world you need to be aware of. So do you think the Inflation Reduction Act, do you think that language, which used to be Build Back Better, do you think that language may be intended, those words may be intended to create a positive impression on whatever the act is? Talk to me.
Yes.
Doesn't it put a positive light on whatever the words are that constitute the act?
Yes.
Yeah, you bet it does. So you're going to be manipulated. Now, you may, and again, the word manipulated may be perfectly fine. The word manipulate can be a positive word. It can be a negative word. This is all about words. Just understand, as a lawyer, you have to be at the front, at the tip of this lance, and not at the end of it. All right. And it's all about words. We can go into think about again, if we take stare decisis, which just means that a court will give great deference to a prior court decision. That's all. Stare decisis just means if the Supreme Court has said A, and A has been around for a while, then subsequent courts, they should give great weight to whatever that decision was. Okay, so you can accept that as a principle, meaning one court should abide by what a prior court has done, right? And then you would be saying, well, the Supreme Court's decision in the Dobbs case, which overruled the Roe case, you can say, wow, see, they should never have done that, because the Roe case was stare decisis. It was prior decision. So could somebody say that? Talk to me. Come on.
Yes.
And when you say that, Julie, when you say that stare decisis matters in this case, aren't you also saying that stare decisis matters in other cases?
Yes, I agree.
And so then I can reach out and say to you, so the Lochner decision from 1905, which was good law until about 1937, which said the state of New York could not regulate the working hours of a baker, the state of New York said in 1937, well, 1905, what this court said was, you know what? There is a right to contract that you can read into the 14th Amendment. And that right to contract is constitutionally protected by procedural due process and substantive due process. That was overturned by the Roosevelt Court in 1937, I believe. If you're going to take the position that Roe should not have been overturned, shouldn't you also then take the position that Lochner should not have been overturned? Which allowed, basically what Lochner did is it said there was some baker who wanted to work more than 60 hours a week, right? And the state of New York said, no, you can't work more than 60 hours a week because we're concerned about the implications of health for that. And we're concerned about the implications of possible coercion. Is that the employer making you do it, or is it the employee who wants to do it? But what I'm saying to you is, if you, as a lawyer, you now have to understand that when you take a position that your heart, and maybe your head, maybe both, right? When your heart says, I want to take this position, you understand it may come back to haunt you. So can you engage in this type of thought? You know, so what's going on in analytical reasoning is we read two different ways. Like when you're reading Supreme Court cases, right? It's a lot of pages. It's very difficult to pore through. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of words, right? But then you're going to leave, say, contracts class, or con law. So let's go with con law. You're in con law. So everything you're reading in con law is a constitutional law case. So it's case law. And then you go from room 101 into room 102. But now you're not in con law. Now you've moved to the other room, and now you're taking a class in any regulatory environment. So maybe you're now taking a class in healthcare law, which is what my wife is involved in. Maybe you're taking a class in criminal procedure law, which now you're reading the procedure, right? You're not reading the case law, you're reading the procedure. Maybe you're taking a class in the penal law being statutory law. So now you're not reading the cases, you're reading there are cases, and then there are statutes, and then there are regulations. You guys get that? Talk to me.
Yes.
Yes. Wouldn't it be nice if you could show some evidence that you're able to read statutes the way they're designed to be read and regulations the way they're designed to be read? Now, talk to me. Come on, give me something. Statutes have precious few words. Whereas the case you're reading, right? So you're reading the Dobbs decision, it's going to go on for 120 pages. If you're reading the statute that's involved, the statute's not going to go on for 120 pages. It's probably not going to go on for 3 pages. It's a statute, or it's a regulation. You get so there's here as a lawyer, when I'm reading a statute, I may only be reading 45 words. Whereas I'm reading a case, I may be reading thousands, tens of thousands of words. So do you get that when you only have 45 words as opposed to 45,000 words, the words take on greater importance? Does this make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yes, it does.
Okay. So you can just look at any analytical reasoning, and term I'm going to use as a hypothetical. What they do in analytical reasoning is they give you 4 hypotheticals. They're hypothetical statutes. If you just take any analytical reasoning hypothetical, and let's get, so say, it's 1 through 6 or 7 through 12, or, 13 through 17, or, 18 through 22. Those are what I'm calling hypotheticals. The number of words you're reading is de minimis, is meaning there just are very few of them. I mean, you can look at the questions and there'll be more words in the questions. But when you look at the statutory information you're given, what do you get? You get, there are 7 cars. And, they give you the letters of the cars, right? And they say, and the cars will come, they're in a race and they'll finish in order from 1 through 7, according to the following conditions. Would you agree there aren't a lot of words in there?
Yes.
But
Yes.
think about how different that is from reading comprehension. It's like the opposite world. But yeah, hello. That's because in law school, my life has been more in the statutory, it's been both worlds, right? But my life has been more statutory than constitutional, although in the appellate work that changed. But trial work, it's really not constitutional at all. It's statutory. So the analytical reasoning section is there to say, if I give you precious few words and then I start changing the words, I start amending, do you get that laws get amended? They change over time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, right. So if you look at what's going on in analytical, they give you a set of conditions. So the set of conditions are there are 7 cars that are going to end up 1st through 7th. Okay. But then the conditions are changed, they're altered, they're amended, just like in the real world.
Mr. Peter,
Yes, no.
I have a question. This is a question that I wanted to ask long before, and I just didn't know if it's a good question or not. But what is the difference between constitutional law and statutory law?
Well, the difference is in form. In other words, constitutional law, one, is law that is limited to an examination of the Constitution. So the Constitution sets out the basic rights that are designed to be enjoyed by all of us. And constitutional law is an exploration of that. So, if there's a right in the Constitution to speech, but in constitutional law, okay, but what is speech? Does speech include gestures? In other words, is speech just a spoken word, or is speech now nonverbal communication? When I do this, am I engaging in speech? Yeah, well, I mean, common sense would say yes, right? When the document was written, when the Constitution was written, they had no way of knowing there'd be an internet. So they would not have thought of the internet as their understanding of speech, because it didn't exist. The Second Amendment, the right to have and bear arms. Well, in 1789, they didn't have submachine guns. So we don't really, we have to explore what did they mean. So constitutional law is this, I mean, I love it because you just get, it's very flowery. You just get, well, what did they mean? What, and so you can read that in Justice Kennedy's decision in the Obergefell case. That was the same-sex right. What did marriage mean? Well, marriage clearly did not mean, and back in the day, anything other than a man and a woman. That's what it meant. But constitutional law allows you to say, well, but what about today? How has the concept changed? So it's like if you have, to me, it's like the constitutional stuff is very creative, and it's just, you get to be it's almost philosophical. The statutory law is, what is the word? Like in the New York State penal law, there's the word weapon. What constitutes a weapon? What is a weapon? So if I stab somebody with a butter knife, is a butter knife a weapon? Is my car a weapon? What does the word? This is all about words. And so again, you got to try as best you can, and it's not easy for you guys, but you really do have to kind of step outside the echo chamber you're in, where you don't get to the words because you feel so strongly about an issue that you can't get to the bloody word. And you need the bloody word in this business. And then by all means, hold on to your passion and live your passion. But when you're being a lawyer, just read the bloody words. So the difference is I don't know, does that answer your question, Melanie? It really is. One's very detailed, very narrow, and the other is anything but that.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And get excited. Again, part of what I'm doing in this first session is trying to get you to, I can't do the work for you, and you don't want me to do the work for you. And you're not going to rub my head and go to law school. All right. But law school is not, law school is something that I completely believe can be attained by someone who's just down to earth, meaning you acknowledge your weaknesses and your strengths, is willing to work at his or her weaknesses and be patient. You know what? It may not happen in 3 months. It may not happen in 6 months. There's Lawrence. I don't know where Lawrence is now, but I love it. Lawrence took the LSAT. Lawrence, when I knew Lawrence, he was in the Bronx. He had, I believe, 13 kids. He was from Nigeria.
I'm sorry, you say 13?
13 children. Yep. And he ran a real estate company. I mean, he was a really, really interesting guy. He would not stop. And he basically was saying, he was saying to me, I'm going to do this. I have to do this. I have to see this through. Lawrence took the LSAT probably a dozen times. And back then, you could only take it 3 times in 2 years. So he was at it. He must have been at it for 6 years. And Lawrence made it. I bumped into him at Pace Law School. And it's just great. So I'm not saying that's going to be your path. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying, don't be a victim. If you can't get this in 3 months, then you didn't get it in 3 months. If you don't get it in 6 months, you know what? You didn't get it in 6 months. If you don't get it at all, it's not the end of your life. It's a test. Right. But it's that attitude, that motivation, and the willingness to walk the walk. So analyticals on this test to say, if I give you very few number of words, so I give you original conditions, which would be the statute the way it was originally written, right? So you have, okay, yeah, so 7 cars that can end up 1st through 7th, and there's no ties. Got it. But now they start to change the law. And they say, well, but car F comes, it finishes earlier than car G and H. And then they tell you that, car K and car L, they can't be consecutive. However they turn out, they can't be consecutive. And what they're doing is mimicking statutes. Or they're mimicking, in other words, so I'm trying a case. And I have multiple defendants, and I have multiple jurisdictions. So maybe I have a mail fraud case, and I've got 7 defendants, and I've got 3 states that I can try them in because it's a federal offense. So I can try them in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Okay, and that's my original condition. So Peter, 7 defendants, you're going to try them in one of these 3 states. Tell me what you want to do. And then I may say to you, well, I don't want to try defendants G and H in Connecticut because they have roots in that state, and it's going to be hard for me to find a jury that's not sympathetic to them. Does that sound like something that could happen? Talk to me.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then, the condition is neither G nor H can be tried in Connecticut. And then I say, now that I've been thinking about it, the case we have against L is the strongest case. And if we push on L, L's either going to fold and give me a plea and agree to testify against somebody else, or if I have to go to trial, I'm going to get the conviction, and then I'm going to be able to look at the other defendants and say, so you want a piece of this too? So might there be a condition now that says I want to try L first or second? Talk to me.
Makes
Yeah.
much more sense. This is the area where that scares me, analytical reasoning, but the way you're putting it makes sense.
Well,
We hope that I can understand it.
yeah, it's not logic game. That's all bullshit. This is, and as you do that, I promise you, I absolutely I've spent my life doing this. Right? That's what they're doing. And now you say, well, wait a minute. If L's got to be first or second, then that case, can that case take place? How does that affect now this other condition you had where these other two defendants cannot be tried in Connecticut? And you start to weave these things together. So what they're doing, it's really cool. I don't know how they came up with it, but it's really cool. Is they're seeing, one, can you take the original language of statute? And then the fancy way of saying this is, can you create the derivative law? And now there's another word, derivative. If you're not familiar with that word now, well, that's okay. But you get, when you go to law school, that's no longer an option, right? And so the derivative here is simply when you apply the amendment or the constraint to the original language, you change the original language, right? Because now it's not, if you have, whatever it is, J through P, or, whatever, F through P, and they can be anywhere, but then there's an amendment that says, well, you know what, F can't be first, third, or fifth. Well, then the derivative law is, since F can't be first, third, or fifth, F has to be second, fourth, sixth, or seventh. That's so the derivative just means that's what you ended up with, right? And this is, the LSAT is probably a more advanced way of thinking. How cool will it be when you can claim for your own participating in a more advanced way of thinking? It's not academic, again, which is no way in a million years. You want to be in academia, then academics are going to serve you, and that's wonderful. For heaven's sakes, perfectly, it's wonderful. It's not law. Law is about application. Law is not about me repeating to you what Aristotle's function argument. It's not what it's about, nor do any lawyer that I know care. It's about the application of a principle to a set of conditions or facts. So the way I've described analytical, does it seem that that would measure an ability that would prove useful in law school? Talk to me.
Yes.
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 And has perhaps analytical been explained to you in different ways than what I'm saying?
Yes, definitely.
So you're the judge, aren't you? Aren't you the judge? We're saying, I'm just Peter. I'm just this guy. Right? You're the judge. Everything I say comes out of the mouth of a high-functioning primate. I have been wrong, I will be wrong, and I'll never be perfect. This is what law is. It's not about repeating what anybody says. It's about thinking for yourself and asking questions, not echoing what somebody else says. So if it makes sense to you, if your reason invites you to take this position, then it's your reason. Okay, so I'm thinking, because what I'm trying to say is I can't help you if you don't help yourself. I know. I love this stuff. I love being a lawyer. I wish it for everyone. I wish for everyone this degree of satisfaction I have had. Right. But not everybody can do this. Okay, so that's the second. So that's why analytical's there. And logical reasoning, which we'll jump into shortly. You say, well, I'm involved in a profession. I don't have an occupation. I have a profession. My dad had an occupation. My dad was a bus driver. That's not the same. So I have to have, in other words, the tools that my dad needed to drive the Ogden Avenue bus in the Bronx was he had to know how to drive a stick shift. He had to know how to follow the path the bus was on, the Ogden Avenue line. So there was stuff for sure, right? But the skills I'm required to demonstrate have nothing to do with that. The skills that I and every lawyer on the planet have to demonstrate is the ability to manipulate an argument. Now, again, you're gonna step back, right? You're no longer gonna hear a word and say it's a negative word or a positive word. Right? You hear the word manipulate, and maybe part of you says, well, I don't like the sound of that. Well, why don't you think about what you feel? Because I don't care what you feel. I care about how you reason and what you think. Right. Would you all agree with me that to be a lawyer, you have to have a capacity, you have to have lawyering skills?
Yeah.
Okay. And some of those are empirical, which I'll get to. And again, these words I use, right? They're the words that, and I'm about as non-fancy as a lawyer is going to get. But if I'm using words and you're not familiar with them, please feel free to chime in. And alternatively, just take note that it's a transition you will have to make. Nobody plays in my sandbox with a shitty vocabulary. Nobody. Now, I had to get to where I am. Right. So I had to take this journey, just like you'll take the journey. But it is a journey that has to be taken. So, okay. So the logical reasoning section requires every single one of these examples requires you to manipulate an argument. Every single one. And no argument will ever be repeated on an LSAT. So you'll never see the same argument that appeared on a prior exam, which means there's no, you can't memorize anything because it's never been there before. And again, this test never changes. Would you agree with me that if you're going to hire me to represent you in a case, you'd want me to be able to strengthen your argument?
Yes.
And you would like me to be able to weaken your adversary's argument?
Yes.
Definitely.
And having looked at all the available facts, you would like me to draw a conclusion that was persuasive?
Yes.
Yes.
And when my adversary presented an argument that was flawed, you would like me to be able to say to you, we got this, and here's the flaw in that argument. Talk to me.
Yes.
And if you were to argue if you were to make a case, or the other side were to make a case and take something for granted, would you want me to be able to point out that the person had made assumptions that are unwarranted?
Yes.
Yes.
Would you like me to be able to, again, just going to what we were saying earlier, Julie, about going from when you take a single instance, so say you look at the decision in Dobbs and you don't like the decision, but nobody cares about that, right? But the protest you lodge is it's not that Dobbs has overruled Roe, right? Do you get that now as a lawyer, your client says, so I want you to make that point. You might be saying to your client, well, we can do that. But if we do that, we have to be able to respond where other cases were overturned that we wanted them overturned. See, we didn't want Roe overturned, right? But maybe we did want Lochner overturned. So when you make this point, we have to now think about, well, wait a minute, how does it affect other similarly situated outcomes? Yes, talk to me.
Yes.
So that's a principle. In other words, what you're doing now is you're going out of every time you cite an example, you're saying to yourself, well, wait a minute, if I take this position now, what's the principle I'm attaching myself to, right? Because that may come back to bite me up in the ass on lots of other cases, right? If you're going to say, let's not overturn cases, how about the ever popular Korematsu? Because the Korematsu case, which is during World War II, the Supreme Court decided it would be just swell to send Japanese Americans into concentration camps, internment camps, to take away their liberty, whatever you want to call the camp, it took away their liberty. So would you agree that was a case we might want to overturn, notwithstanding it has stare decisis value? So do you get it? It's just, I think, and I'm not sure, but my sense is it's a level up in the ability to think, but it's not a level up in being like going from a master's to a PhD. It's not analogous to that. It's just, can you think in a more, can you be more thoughtful? Maybe less opinionated. I mean, by all means, be opinionated, but not when you're doing law. And so when we look at logical reasoning, we see a bunch of situations. You're going to have to strengthen arguments. That makes sense. You're going to have to weaken arguments. That makes sense too. You're going to have to draw conclusions. Well, yeah, I mean, if I haven't done that, I haven't been a lawyer. I'm going to have to identify flaws. Well, yeah, because flaws are fatal. I'm going to have to identify assumptions. Yeah, because if I try a robbery case and I indict a person, well, then I'm saying I believe that person has committed the crime. If I do it on a visual, right? So I have it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're in third and third in Mount Vernon or something, and I have one witness who says, "Yeah, that's the guy." Not a compelling case. Would it be fair to say you would want me to investigate whether or not the person I'm charging with a crime has an identical twin brother? Would you want me to do that? I mean, I'm going to do it because I'm not going to assume that that's not the case. You get it? So we're saying, wait a minute. Now I'll have this dopey little thing we'll look at, but it's so important that our world, there are 4 categories of things. And we all do this. So, there are facts. And usually, if you saw like 4 boxes going from left to right, usually that's the smallest box. Because facts are matters both sides agree to. Facts are not what you say and somebody else disputes, Because in my world, you don't get to say, well, you're a jerk, you can't dispute it. No, everything can be disputed. So a fact is what you're saying is it's a matter not in dispute. Okay, that's one part of your world. The second part of your world are inferences. Inferences are matters you claim to be facts in that they are the derivative, that word again, they are the derivatives of what you have established as a fact. So it's just, again, you want to slow down. You're going to do this the rest of your life. You're not going to rush, right? It's all about words and it's all about being careful. So an example, I don't know that you guys can see that, but is there anybody there who's able to identify the time that
a bit
appeared?
higher,
Yeah.
like higher, like towards your mouth. Yeah,
Okay, are you able to see the time on this?
your phone is off.
So it's not on.
Oh, it was on when I put it up there.
Yes, I'm on.
Oh,
Turned on.
okay. I don't know that you can see the time. Can you see the time?
11:09.
Yes.
Okay. 11:09. So let's now, you're my adversaries, right? We don't agree on a damn thing. All right, you with me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the mindset you have. So from that 11:09, I say to you, can we stipulate that the time that appears on that is 11:09? Can we stipulate to that?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you'd be a jerk to say no, right? Because we're all seeing it. The judge is going to see it. It's 11:09. Okay. So that's what we can agree to, that says 11:09. Now, how about if I say to you, it is 11:09? Can we agree to that?
Yes, it's 11:09. Or it was.
It's 11:10.
Well, no, let's stay in the moment. Let's stay in the moment, right? That it's still, that I could put that up and it would still say 11:09. If I now say to you, because you've all stipulated, right? That says it's 11:09. Okay. And I say, so it's 11:09, right? So we stipulate to it is 11:09.
Yes.
That's fine.
Why?
Well, could this be wrong?
Yes.
Could be wrong.
Ooh, frisky. Could this time vary from whatever what is it, Greenwich Mean Time, whatever the hell it is? Could the time on this clock, well, could this cell phone be, first of all, could it be wrong?
Yes.
Yes,
It could be.
it
So
could.
why would you stipulate that it is 11:09?
Because we're assuming that it's right.
Ah, yes, Aisha, because you're making an assumption, right? Because you've reached the conclusion that, yeah, it's 11:09. And now you're assuming it's no other time. But we haven't proven. See, the inference on my part would be, well, since it says it's 11:09, that's a fact, right? The inference a regular person draws from that is that it's 11:09. It's like, get a life. It's 11:09. Right? But that inference itself is not a fact because it's a different statement. What this device tells me from what is. Does everybody get that?
Yeah.
Okay. So when, in terms of our world of reasoning, we are aware and that somebody else tells you something does not make it a fact. That 30,000 people tell you the same thing does not make it a fact. It makes it something repeated by 29,999 people. Doesn't become a fact. How many people in the year 500 AD thought and were convinced that the sun revolved around the earth?
Yeah.
So you would have had every living human being saying to you, the sun revolves around the earth. Did that make it a fact?
Back
No.
then,
So please don't forget that. It is not about the number of times something's been said. It's your own obligation to independently inquire and to seek out opposing views. So in our world, there are facts. And again, very narrow ground. The facts is simply something both parties are agreeing to. So, you may want to, would everybody agree with me that it's Saturday right now? I'm on the East Coast. I'm in Westchester County, and in Westchester County right now, it's a Saturday. Can we stipulate to that?
Yes.
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 And could we stipulate that if tomorrow arrives in Westchester County, tomorrow will be Sunday?
Yes.
But could we just stipulate that tomorrow will be Sunday?
No,
No.
Why not? That's right, I think.
because different time zones, we'll assume everybody's in the same
But we
time.
could do that. Yes, no, I didn't go enough with that, Aisha. But let's say we start with what is a fact, which is we're all agreeing that, which makes it a fact, right? Facts aren't what you want them to be. Right. Facts are matters not in dispute. So out there on the other side of an argument, somebody's going to say there's a difference between a changing climate and climate change. Okay. You may not like to hear that, but somebody's going to say that. So long as somebody says that, your claim is now in dispute and therefore is not factual. Gabish? So when I say, and we agree, we stipulate, right? That at least in Westchester County, it's now Saturday. If I were to say, and therefore we can infer tomorrow will be Sunday, is that correct?
Yes.
Really?
No.
Well, what's the difference between saying today is Saturday and tomorrow will be Sunday? Because one is a fact and one is an inference.
I was gonna say, like, I'm saying that today is Saturday, we can't dispute it, but someone could find a way to dispute that tomorrow is Sunday. So you can't say it's a fact.
Okay, meaning somebody, it is possible that Congress runs into session.
And they say tomorrow's not called Sunday anymore. It's like,
Right. It's not gonna, it's gonna, right. Is it also possible that there is no tomorrow?
Yes.
Well, if there is no tomorrow, is it Sunday?
No.
So,
Okay,
these
I thought I was wild for thinking that because I thought that was a little extreme, but now I'm understanding that it's all possibilities.
Correct. That's right, Aisha. It is lose what you don't want to consider. It is an understanding, and it's the core of our reasoning, is to separate facts, because I know the other side is going to agree with it. Right? If it's a fact, then our definition of fact is basically all the parties agree to it. Whether it's right or wrong doesn't matter. I could go to the judge and say, well, yeah, Judge, today's Tuesday, but defense counsel and I have agreed that tomorrow will be called Friday. And the judge could look at us like we're crazy, and he said, well, wait a minute, are you saying you both stipulate that tomorrow will be called Friday for the purposes of this court proceeding? And we both say yes. Well, then for the purposes of this court proceeding, what is tomorrow?
Friday.
Right. So it's a definitions, right? The definition of a fact is a matter not in dispute. On the LSAT, everything is given to you as a fact. That which is not a conclusion is given to you as a fact. So on the LSAT, if again, the first sentence says every planet you'll never see is purple, no matter what argument it's in, if you have a sentence that says every planet you'll never see is purple, what is now a fact?
That statement.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the way we're taught to reason. And would it be fair to say that is distinguishable from perhaps the way you have been taught to reason up to now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not saying anything's better. Or, this is the way it should be done. It doesn't matter. You don't get a choice. You may not like this, but then don't be a lawyer. Right, because it's the way you're going to reason. So when you leave what is factual, you now go into what is inferential. And the definition of an inference is it's something we claim as fact, in that it follows from facts that have been established. So, and every time you infer, you're at risk of being wrong. There's no exception, zero exception. It may be a really, really remote risk, but that's the nature. If you don't like being human, well, you're stuck with it. Nobody really cares if you like being human. Here we are. You're a high functioning primate. If that pisses you off, well, then just be pissed off, but you're a high functioning primate. So when we infer, we're leaving the cocoon of facts. And some of us infer things that are wildly unlikely, but that doesn't mean they can't happen, right? And some of us infer things that are terribly, terribly probable, but that doesn't mean they must happen. Right, so you can get it. So that's the heart of this, right? Is on the LSAT, you're inferring on almost on every argument. I mean, sometimes you're not. The difference between an inference and a deduction is sometimes you're deducing and not inferring. It's rare, and that's what you need to be aware of when you infer. And remember, you can only infer if you've established facts. So if you haven't established facts, you can't infer. And you can't have a fact until it's a matter not in dispute, which means you got to get the other side to agree. So you're going to spend a lot of times in this profession just establishing what is fact. Right. So one box here in terms of the reasoning is establishing what are facts, establishing inferences that flow from those facts. So again, in regular life, we're driving a car and there's a stop sign dead ahead. So let's say 50 feet ahead, there's a stop sign. Car is operating fine. There's no problem with the car. You have your license. You plan to comply with the motor vehicle and traffic law. You have not yet stopped. You with me? You're still driving, right? You're still in the car. You're still driving. There's a stop sign. What conclusion do you reach before you stop? What conclusion do you reach about what will happen when you get to that stop sign? What are you going to do?
You will stop.
Yeah. And you see that that's an inference because it hasn't happened yet.
Mm.
Okay. And that inference serves also as a conclusion, meaning sometimes conclusions require multiple inferences. But sometimes, I mean, basically every conclusion rests on your final inference. So when you're done inferring, that's your conclusion. Okay. And once you have a conclusion, you can now identify assumptions. So again, in this world of reasoning, right? All right, Julie. So now I have your conclusion that so we all have Julie's conclusion, right? That she's going to stop when she gets the stop sign. Every time you draw a conclusion, you can identify assumptions, which are things that are taken for granted, right? Everybody's arguments, certainly have nothing to do with Julie's argument. Every time we conclude something, don't we assume it's non-contradiction?
Yes.
Right. So in other words, if you assume, say you're going to get married, and you infer you're going to be happy with your partner, you're going to be happy. Haven't you assumed you will not end up being unhappy?
Yes.
Okay, so every conclusion you draw, you would assume it's non-contradiction. So we all agree now, Julie has assumed, since she said she will get to the stop sign, hasn't she assumed that there will not be something to prevent her from getting to the stop sign?
A pedestrian.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what could happen in the 8 seconds before Julie gets to the stop sign that messes up her conclusion? You make something up.
A jaywalker, road closed.
A jaywalker would slow her down, but not necessarily stop her from getting a stop sign.
She will keep going.
So that would slow her down for sure, Aisha, right? It would slow her down. but we need something that would make it impossible for Julie to ever get to that stop sign.
Her brakes fail.
I'm sorry?
Her brakes fail.
The brakes fail, but her brakes fail, that would say she didn't stop at the stop sign.
Somebody hits her.
Accident.
A tractor trailer in the way.
A tractor trailer, when you say in the way, where in the way?
Preventing her
Or,
from the
or the stop sign.
stop sign.
Yeah, well, meaning if you're going to say the tractor trailer, then you'd have to say that,
Perpendicular.
well, that requires that trailer to be in the space in between the front end of Julie's car and the stop sign. In other words, it wouldn't help if it were behind the stop sign, right? So you need to be more specific in saying where that tractor trailer is. And then the argument would be, even if the tractor trailer were perpendicular to Julie's car, in between the stop sign and Julie's car, is it possible Julie's car could go under the tractor trailer?
Is possible.
Not likely, but is it possible?
Will we be also assuming that she's the only one on the road?
No,
Just-
there could be other
just-
cars on the road.
She can see the stop sign, because I'm not gonna lie, like how Julie inferenced, you can see the stop sign, but I'm also assuming that it's late at night in my head that she's driving, so she can see it. So would
No,
that be?
you have to add that into the facts, so we don't have whether it's day or night, but you see the sign.
Can
How
you
about
say,
this? I'm good, Jessica, go ahead.
can you say that she made a turn away from the stop sign?
She made a turn, well,
Yeah, she didn't
I
get to
like
the-
that you're saying,
Yeah.
so her forward progress stopped before she got to the stop sign. And then she made some kind of left or right hand turn or backed up, put it in reverse. Yeah, I think that would do it. If we're saying that Julie gets the stop sign, haven't we assumed that Julie will be alive when she gets the stop sign?
Mhm.
Because if she's not alive, she didn't get to the stop sign. And, tragically, each of us will make that assumption at some point going forward, where, you think about you're going to have dinner. Don't you assume you're going to be here for dinner?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how many people on September 11th do you think plan to have dinner that night?
A lot.
So assumptions are things that are critical. In other words, it's not something that just makes the outcome unlikely. That's how you weaken an argument. By making the outcome unlikely, that's weakening an argument. So we could put that tractor trailer there. It'd be a very, very, very strong weakening of this argument. Like if the argument was Julie's going to get to the stop sign and Samantha had testimony, there was a tractor trailer that came and was perpendicular. It would really, really weaken Julie's argument. But it's not something Julie assumed to be. It didn't have to be, because there might be some way to get out of that. But if Julie's no longer alive, that I would cash in the chips on that one. And yes, if the car, for whatever reason, could only go in reverse, in that 8 seconds or something, it could no longer go forward. Well, you're not going to get a stop sign. But again, go to these boxes, facts. For the purposes of law and the LSAT, it's what because if the parties don't agree to it, you're going to have to litigate it. Do you get that? It's not that you're wrong. It's not that the thing you're claiming as a fact isn't correct. It's that in law, if you want to claim as a fact that the climate is warming as a result of human influence to a dangerous degree, if that's what you want to claim as a fact, someone's going to challenge that. So that doesn't mean your position is wrong. You get that? It doesn't mean that at all. But it does mean you're going to have to respond to contrary argument, because that person may be correct. Now, you may think that's not, I can't be. Well, think of the folks back in 500, AD who thought the sun revolved around the earth. So we go from a fact to an inference, which are derivatives of the fact. So that word derivative is right here back in logical reasoning. It's in analytical reasoning. It's also in reading comprehension, but the derivative is really the form of intelligence, where you're creating something that wasn't there. And the third box in this world is, how many arguments have you made where you knew everything there was to know?
Never.
No, that's huge in our world. You have to know what you don't know, and you have to modulate your conclusion to take that into account. You need to be somewhat modest. You don't need to be modest to run for political office. If you're actually going to be a serious lawyer, you're going to step out of what you want. You're going to step out of your own personal convictions. And this whole world now becomes observational. So it's what have I established? Those are my facts. What can I infer from those facts that will persuade a persuadable person? Person's not persuadable, then they're not persuadable. That's okay. But that's not my world. My world is this persuadable world, right? But merely having established facts and merely having established persuadable inferences, that doesn't address that I don't know what I don't know. That this box can be very large, where you're saying, but what have I not taken into account? How complicated is this thing I'm claiming? So if you're going to claim anything about climate is pretty complicated. It's actually really complicated. And so if you're going to claim anything about, and again, just in regular world, just please knock yourself out, claim whatever you want to claim. I mean, have fun with it, right? But understand that as a lawyer, there's far more I don't know about climate than that I do know about climate. And I have, and so I want to deal with that. I want to get in there and say, but what don't I know? And so this box, so my world has been, again, as a DA, there's lots I don't know. I mean, I've worked on unsolved homicides. You get it unsolved because we don't know. So it's getting into that box and trying to make that box smaller and uncover or discover what you didn't have before. So always keep in mind, and the more complicated something is, the more likely that box may well contain something fatal to your case, but you don't know what you don't know. Okay, that's the third component. And the fourth and final component is, again, in this world, there's an adversary. There is somebody on the other side you don't get to marginalize. There is somebody on the other side you simply can't say, well, you voted for Donald Trump. No. That person is going to come in with a case. And that case has to be affirmatively addressed, not dismissed, not put some slogan on it. The merits have to be addressed. And you may find in addressing the merits of the other side, it clips your wings. Gee, that's awful. So you get that's it. And that, in logical reasoning, that's all they want you to do. So the reasoning process, again, facts, inferences. You can always be mistaken, no matter how sure you are of yourself. Once you leave the cocoon of the fact, you can always be mistaken, which is why there are standards in law, right? The standards in law are beyond a reasonable doubt and a preponderance of evidence. So beyond a reasonable doubt, which has been my world, is I have 12 of you in the jury. And at the end of this, I have to show you enough evidence. You with me? Not what I feel, not the outcome I want, you have to look at the evidence, which are the facts and the inferences. And the conclusion, which is, I'm saying, based on that, here's the conclusion, which you should then be saying, okay, but the conclusion requires assumptions. Have they been adequately taken into account? If you can do this on the logical reasoning section, you will do very, very well in the logical reasoning section, because all they do is say, now take these 4 boxes, right? Facts, inferences, the absence of knowledge, and there's an adversary. And somebody says to you, now, if you always have these 4 boxes, never changes, it won't change ever while you're practicing law. You'll say, what box am I in? All right. And now you say, well, I got to weaken the other side's case, or I have to strengthen the other side's case, or I have to draw a conclusion, or I have to identify a principle, or I have to identify a flaw or an assumption. It's all in those 4 boxes. So if I say, well, if you want me to weaken a case, well, I could go to the original facts, which everybody stipulated to, right? And try to go in there and say, well, but it wasn't, that really wasn't a fact. I mean, the fact that you 2 guys said it was a fact, maybe it wasn't. The richer area is on the inferences, right? The richer area, if you want to weaken an argument, is to say the inference you drew was not one that was required to have been drawn. So when you said to me that it was, whatever it was, 1109, whatever it was, right? When you said it was 1109, I'm going to point out to you that was an inference, because the mere fact that a device has that number on it doesn't mean it's accurate. And that's going to weaken your argument. It doesn't destroy your argument, right? It could still be 1109, but you haven't proved it. Right? And you have to prove, it's not enough that you're right. You have to prove you're right. Right? You can weaken an argument by going to an assumption, but at that point, you've not just weakened it, you've destroyed it, right? Because if you identify an assumption, the assumption is fatal. In other words, if there's an assumption contrary to your conclusion, it's fatal. It doesn't weaken the argument, it destroys it. And so that's what they do in logical reasoning. And what we'll do, yeah, it's 11:35. What we'll do is we'll take, say, 10 minutes and we'll come back. And now what you're going to need for this class is you need Law Hub. All right. And you'll need to be able to have Law Hub available as we go through this. Right. So on another device or on the device, whatever you're on, right? But Law Hub is absolutely essential. And then I want to get you into the logical reason just to start this, right? But how to proceed is really, really important. This is not just, it's not me saying to you, well, read chapters 1 and 2 this week and read chapter 3 and 4 next week. This is not about that. This is about, you have to, and when I say you have to learn how to prepare, you guys know how to prepare. You may not be familiar with how a lawyer would prepare. Because again, it's not memorization. So it's just not, and it's not even advanced cognition. It's not, I can wrap my mind around something really complicated. Maybe later that's there, but it's not what this is. So I need to spend some time saying, okay, let me show you what I want you to do, because now it's taking IRAC. So the issue, so taking into logical reasoning, right? The issue is, and it's about 14 issues: weaken, strengthen, conclude, assume, flaw, principle, paradox, something like that, right? They never change. That's the issue. The rule is the argument itself, right? So again, if that first sentence starts out with every planet you'll never see is purple, okay, you're the boss, right? So I'm bound by that. The application is, think about this, right? Is the whole purpose of this is to solve. So I'm not going to read the law until I have the issue. Because I want to know, if you want me to weaken an argument, wouldn't you have a different mindset? Wouldn't you have a different psychology than if you were strengthening an argument? Stop and think about it for a second. Right? So it's not just the words in the argument, it's what's my mindset. Because if my mindset is to dismantle it, well, then I'm going to read it with a certain psychology. If my mindset is to repair it, well, that's very different. So the way this works is you always start with the issue, which again will never change. You then read the rule, which is the argument. You read it textually, which is what you're going to be doing exclusively in analytical reasoning. So I'm reading textually. So, well, what does that mean? Well, it means every time there's punctuation, I pause. It's not a speed reading test. And again, there's so many factors. This is not a test that's designed to be completed. Right? It's a psychometric test. So psychometric tests are meant that if you complete this test and you do really, really well, you're simply a freak. You're a really bright freak, but you're a freak. Make no mistake about it. Right? Because that's not what's it's not designed for that. It's designed that you got to be crazy to be able to do this. So I'm not. I think I could do quite well in the test, but that's not who I am. I'll go to a very good law school and they'll pay me to go there. I can live with the shame. You may not. You may be the freak, which I mean, and Lord knows I've met them. And so you have to have that knowledge in advance. Where you know, what is my ability? But the way this works is punctuation is the author's telescope. They're screaming at you. When I punctuate, you're to pause. If it's a comma, the pause is brief. If it's a semicolon, if semicolon is not brief, it's almost like a period. If it's a period, it's a period. If it's a colon, a list is coming, right? And I'm reading sentence by sentence with a purpose. The purpose is, say, to weaken. So every sentence, I'm saying, okay, am I reading a fact or am I reading a conclusion? Because that's all you're going to read, nothing else. And so reading textually is reading for the role in the argument and for the content of the argument. And it just takes practice, right? But the role in the argument means if you're reading a fact, and again, the word fact or the word evidence or the word premise, they all mean the same thing for the purpose of this test. If I'm reading a sentence that's a fact, that's different from reading a sentence that's a conclusion. Now, I'm not going to know until I've read the whole argument, but the conclusion is the thing that's being explained, the matter being explained. That's the conclusion. The explaining, that's the evidence. And so when you've read it, you say, okay, this sentence was here for this reason, this sentence was here for this reason, this sentence is the conclusion. The conclusion could be the first sentence, it could be the middle sentence, it could be any sentence, be the last sentence. So don't think, well, the conclusion is the final, it will be final sentence, but it doesn't have to be. It will be the first sentence, but it doesn't have to be. You identify a conclusion by its role in the argument, not by its placement in the argument, right? So it is the thing being explained. And so this reading textually is you saying, let me begin this process. So don't do this under time conditions right now. It's now learning to read the way we taught to read, right? Which is, okay, I want to separate the evidence from the conclusion, which in time will take no time. And I want to read with insight. So every time I get to a period, I pause and say, do I get that? Do I understand what the writer intended? You with me? Not what I want the writer to write. It's not about me, My job is to understand what the writer intended to convey. That's it. Good night, like that. Whether I agree with that or I don't agree with that is immaterial. What did the writer intend to convey? And language. So now I'm agnostic, meaning I have no position. When I see the word exploit, I don't draw any conclusions about the word exploit. I don't see it as a positive word. I don't see it as a negative word, because it's not my view that matters. It's the writer's view that matters. So the writer may use a word in a context that is not commonly used, right? So it's okay. Here's a word that's susceptible to misinterpretation. Well, when you see a word susceptible to misinterpretation, it's probably there for a reason. And so you're just saying, this is what it is to be a lawyer. Where are the traps? But to recognize the traps, you have to recognize the person who's laying the traps, right? So it's really cool. And again, it's so law school, and it's so law. So what I'm going to do now is we'll, when we come back, you should just have Law Hub up so that you're able to view it. I'm going to start with the way I'll do this is we're going to start with prep test 72. And I'm going to work through as much as we can get through prep test 72 forward. Right. So when you go on Law Hub, you're going all the way back to like prep test 19. And the prep tests that are earlier are the prep tests that you use as source material, as preparation. It's really cool. Law Hub is so incredibly valuable. But when starting with 72, the reason I'm doing that is the videos that we have will supplement the tests we're doing. So we'll be able to go over it. For the most part, you're going to be able to see videos that cover the same material. So I want to reinforce how IRAC is used on this test. So for the class portion, we're going to go from 72 forward, upward, right? For the preparation, in addition to what you'll be doing with us, right? In the preparation is you're going to go all the way back to prep test 19. And you're going to start, and I'll show you an example of a spreadsheet, but you're saying, I'm going to do this methodically. You don't have to do it the way Peter would do it. You have to do it the way a lawyer would do it, right? And the way a lawyer would do it is, okay, so what do you do? What are you going to test me on? You're going to test me, do I understand how to weaken an argument? Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to go back to the earlier material and just practice weakening arguments. And you're going to see if I can strengthen arguments, identify assumptions, flaws, principles, all these different functions, right? Which are the functions of law. And I'm going to take it one at a time. You can work on them any old way you want and say, I'm going to really come to understand, what does it mean to weaken an argument? I'm going to really come to understand what an assumption is, which requires you to understand all this other stuff about conditions, necessary and sufficient conditions, cause and effect, all this other stuff that's all about law. And so it's a dual effort. One, when we're together, 72 forward. When we're not together, you'll be reviewing the videos and stuff on this, but then you're really drilling it home and reinforcing it by methodically preparing issue by issue in logical reasoning. We'll be doing the same thing in the other, in analytical and reading comp. There's different ways of doing it, but essentially it's very, very similar. And I suspect at the end of this, you'll notice that you're reasoning in a different way. Hopefully a better way. It'll certainly be a different way. So does that make sense? Are you guys saying yes to the LSAT?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
All right, so we'll take 10 minutes to come back, and then when we come back, have the Law Hub available so that we can actually now begin to apply what I'm saying to the test.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back. You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
All right. This is so exciting.
Okay.
All right. So what I'm going to try to do is, and again, this is just preparation is personal. So I can demonstrate to you, how I would prepare, right? That doesn't mean it's right for you. It means I'm probably an okay example of the principle of how lawyers learn, how we prepare for cases. And I'm saying you should prepare for the test the way I prepare for a case. There's no difference. And when I say I mean as a lawyer would, not as Peter would. And so what I want to do is this, is just so you know, you have resources besides the Zoom session, right? So when you go into your account, you have access to, like the Zoom session is separate, that comes to you in a different link. But when you go and you open your account up, you should have access to the prior class videos, which came when I was at the law schools. And those videos follow what we're doing. They don't follow exactly the same, but right now what you'll see is you'll see class 1 when it was live. And you want to take, and that was like, it's close to 5 hours. I mean, when the class was live, it was a 5-hour class. So those videos piggyback on what we're doing. And they can be, it certainly will cover material I'm not covering here and reinforce it. So one thing is you get into your account, you'll go to courses you're registered for, and you'll see that you have 3 courses. You have the whether it's the pipeline or the standalone program, those videos are the same. You get in there, you'll see them. You also have the analytical reasoning library, and you have the logical reasoning library.
Mr.
So
Peter,
one-
I'm sorry, I'm not able to see your screen.
You don't see me?
No.
No.
Oh, that's because I don't have my oh, so what a loser, me.
Yes, no.
Thank you, Melanie. I didn't realize it wasn't because I saw me. Well, actually, I didn't see me. I thought I saw me. Shelby saw me. Shelby's here with me, so I'm safe. So again, if you don't take advantage of the resources, then you're not, it's a behavioral thing, right? It's like, then you need, not that I'm any great shakes, but you're here for a reason. So from my end, the thought behind this, right, is we use the Zoom sessions to be together. You build on the Zoom sessions by looking at the videos from the live class at the time, right? That was going over similar material. So class 1, the live class, is going to be pretty closely related to what we're doing, but it's not going to be identical. Nothing's changed. The fact that the videos may be at this point, a couple of years old or 18 months old, nothing's changed. So one resource is you want to get in there, and that'll be under the, again, whether it's a standalone program or the pipeline program, the videos are the same. There are 2 other courses in there that you have access to: the analytical reasoning library and the logical reasoning library. Okay. Probably makes sense if we're working on logical reasoning to, gravitate over to the logical reasoning library. And we're working on analytical to do that. But those libraries there all the time. Analytical is very extensive. I mean, it goes from exam 52 through exam, I think, 84. So there's a lot of analytical videos there. And that's just meant to reinforce what you do here. The logical reasoning library, which is done out there in the deck of the house, is meant to demonstrate from prep test 78 through 87, right? So there are 10 exams, so there'll be, I guess that's 500 of these arguments, plus minus 10 or something, where I'm going over them. So how you use these resources is what works best for you. In other words, if you're working on logical reasoning, so I'm using now we'll look at 72. So exam 72 is not a video, but I want to kind of work my way up to exam 78, which is where we'll start. Right. You may want to try to answer, forget about time. Please forget about time. This is about learning how to learn. We'll get the time. I promise you we'll get the time. Nobody's ever said to me, Peter, you forgot to do this under time conditions. We'll be fine. It really is, and it sounds so stupid because we all know how to learn, but lawyers are taught to learn a certain way. So just slow your asses down and say, wait a minute, this might take some time. So that's the purpose, certainly of the logical reasoning video, is to demonstrate how do you apply IRAC to the section. And so you don't have to take a whole section under time conditions. You don't have to take anything on time conditions. Sit down, open up prep test 78 or something and say, let me go to the logical reasoning section and answer the first 5 questions. Taking my time, not worrying about time. And then let me go watch the video, right? And just see how Peter does it. It may be helpful, it may not be helpful. But what I'm saying is there's no one way to do this. It's perfectly fine to take an entire section, if that's constructive. There's absolutely no need to do it. So, and the same would be true with analytical. If you want to begin your journey in analytical, begin by trying to work with some examples not under time conditions, and then go look at what I'm doing, right? So an analytical that would begin at exam 52 and say, so let me just open up and see if I can do one of these. And then go watch the video, and over the course of the program, it's very likely this stuff's going to make sense. But you've got to put in the effort. Again, unless you're just naturally gifted, in which case you should all the more reason put in the effort. But law school is not unachievable. It's just not. It's just not. It's yeah. So any questions on the resource you have available, and just get creative in how you want to use them. Okay. So I'm going to put up on my screen, and I'm going to be reading Law Hub off of a different screen. But what I'm going to put up on my screen, and this I'll send to everyone, are the notes on, let me see if I can do this here. Oop, I got to do share screen first. This is so exciting. Sharing my first screen. Oh crap, it went away. All right, hang on one second. I'll notes. Share. Okay, so I'm going to skip down through this because I want to get to this. Is you'll get all these notes, right? But what I want to do now is I want you to go to Law Hub. And it's just to get your traction, just to get a feel for how you do this. So if you go to Prep Test 72, and you open up section 2, so you need to get there. You need to get to Prep Test 72 and section 2.
Mr. Peter, I don't see 72, I see 71.
Prep Test 72 will be right underneath Prep Test 71.
It's not there for me either.
It's 73, it skipped
It's
72.
71 and 73.
Yes.
Hang on a second. You're saying there,
Do you
I
guys
have
have
my-
Graded?
the Law Hub Plus?
No.
You have to get the graded version, I think.
Oh, so you have
Yeah.
to get the Law Pub Plus, yeah.
yes, you need the law, yes, you need the law, you need to give them their $99.
Okay.
Yes.
I have
Yeah.
a question as well. So on
sorry?
mine, I chose self-paced, but there's a timer going off on the side. Is that okay? Because now I'm at 34 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine, because it would, even if the time runs out, you'll still be on that, because you didn't put, I think you have an option to put like a test,
Mm-hmm.
but you didn't use that option. You put self-paced, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not, if the time expires, nothing's gonna happen to it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Correct. Yeah. So
Sorry,
I'll read, I'm sorry.
I'm not able to. So we have to have Law Hub Plus.
Correct.
That's why I don't see it.
Yes, no, you need the Law Hub. The plus gives you access basically from Prep Test 19 to Prep Test 92. So it's yes, it's essential. So what I'll do is I'll be able to read this because I'm using 2 screens and I want you to be looking at the notes, not at Law Hub. So I'll be able to read the entire argument, but yes, next week should definitely have Law Hub. And again, going to how I want you to prepare. So the way logical reasoning is set out, again, words matter. So the word correlation really, really matters. And again, maybe that's one of those words that, you know, you haven't been introduced to, or you know, maybe once in a while it comes across your plate or something. But in law school, there's no way you could ever function as a lawyer, not really understand what a correlation is. And all it is a relationship. Some correlations are very strong, and some are not strong at all. But a correlation doesn't mean cause and effect. It means there's a relationship between 2 things. So, you know, there's a relationship between sneezing and having a cold. Sneezing doesn't mean you have a cold, but they're correlated. They're, you know, you see one and you say, well, maybe that's evidence of the other. So correlations are things that the mere fact that they occur at the same time doesn't mean one causes the other. They're just probabilities. So again, in law, there's a correlation between flight from a crime scene and guilt. That it is likely that somebody who runs from a crime scene it's somewhat more likely that person was involved in the crime than someone who stays at a crime scene. It does not mean that merely because somebody runs from a crime scene, they were involved in the crime. They may just been scared and wanted to get the hell out of there. But so correlations, so you don't want to mistake correlations for cause and effect. You don't want to say, well, just because there's a correlation, that means this is always the case. Well, it wouldn't be a correlation then. So
I'm sorry,
correlation
guys.
probability.
Are we on section 1, 2, 3, or 4?
Section 2.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So there is a correlation on the LSAT in this section. Logical reasoning has a reasonably strong correlation. And that correlation is, for whatever reason, right? Arguments that are assigned lower numbers are generally more approachable than arguments assigned higher numbers. Now, you're going to start listening like lawyers, and you're going to start processing information like lawyers, right? So I'm not saying that number 4 is the 4th easiest question on the section. I'm not saying that because something has been assigned number 2, it's easy. First of all, I don't know what easy means, right? But what I am saying is that on any given test, if you could take the LSAT back forever, if you just worked on questions in this section, we're not talking about logical, we're not talking about reading comp, and we're not talking about analytical. We're talking about logical reasoning, right? And you want to test this with your own effort. But if you went all the way back and said, well, how do I perform on questions that are numbered 1 through 12, as opposed to how do I perform on questions that are numbered 13 through 25? It is very likely what you will find is you have stronger outcomes on questions 1 through 12. And that establishes a correlation. And the correlation is that on the LSAT, in this section, logical reasoning, there is a likelihood that a question that falls in this area, say 1 through 12, right? There is a likelihood that it is somewhat more approachable, somewhat less difficult than a question that has been placed in the range from 13 to 25. Just a correlation. So question number 7 could be the most difficult question on the entire test, and it would still be a correlation. Question number 24 could be the most straightforward question on test, and it would still be a correlation. So this really is about getting language and understanding. So correlation is a probability. So there is a probability on your test. If you're looking at question number 4 and you're saying to yourself, this is too easy, but it's probably not too easy. It was probably designed so that a significant majority of test takers are going to get it right. And if you look at number 17 and you're saying, I don't have a clue what they're doing, chances are there's a reason for that. So when you prepare, just be aware, if you're getting a bunch of questions wrong when you get to the back half of the test, it's probably not you. And so your preparation it can be informed, right, by saying, well, let me just focus on the front end of the test and not worry about the back end. So in other words, you're going to be able to go back to prep test 19. And if you work on questions numbered 1 through 12, it may be an effective way to get a grasp on the test. So just that's there. Now, these notes. So here are some definitions, which again, I'll touch on this next week, but I'm going to send these to you, so you'll have, but here are my definitions. These are the terms to me. You know, some of these we've gone over, right? But you know, what an argument is, there's so much here. So I'll send this to everyone. You'll have an opportunity to digest it, right? And then we can discuss what questions you have, what ambiguities are there. And all these terms show up on this task. So just really, this definition section is hugely important, because an argument is not what you wish it to mean any longer. An argument is not what somebody else has defined it in some other discipline. This is what an argument is for the purpose of the LSAT. Now, when I scroll down here, and I'm down here now into, these are the the issue spotting, right? So everything begins with the issue in an IRAC.
Mhm.
All right. And so this is really where you're gonna, when I look at, so I'm looking now at question number 1. And say, well, where do I find this? This is again, prep test 72, section 2, question number 1. Okay. And the first thing I want to do is issue spot. So I look to the top right-hand side, and it says, which one of the following principles, if valid, most helps to justify the reasoning above? So the issue is to identify principle. So nobody's trying to trick you. Nobody's trying to use, obscure language, and it's, you'll look at this and you say, well, it's a principle issue, and they're going to be on my test. And so that says to me, I want to go past this example. So I'm going to read an example of the principal issue. And on your test, there are going to be multiple examples of the principal issue. So what you want to do then is come down here and say, well, what information do I have about principles? And if I scroll down, it's this section right here. Okay. And you say, so, and again, we spoke a little bit earlier about an example of principle, right? That anytime you take a position, you've got to be careful that you're going to keep that position under a different set of facts, right? So a principle, which is my definition, is a general proposition or statement which provides guidance for a specific situation. An example of that is textualism. So when this issue comes up, and it will be on your test, which one of the following principles means it's going to be a general statement? So think of it this way. If the answer is a general statement, then the example has to be of something less general. So you think like, if I, and that just means an example of something. In other words, what would a refrigerator be an example of? If I said refrigerator, stove.
Kitchen appliances?
Yes, yes. So this is not rocket science. This is the principle. In other words, if the issue was identify a principle, and you were reading about a refrigerator, wouldn't it be fair to say that an appliance would be the principle that to which a refrigerator, it's an example of something else, yes. Right? So when you're dealing with principles, when the principle is in the answer choice, the language is going to be broader. So you're going to take whatever you've read, right, and try to say, okay, the answer's got to be broader than what I just read. So if I'm reading about refrigerators, it's got to be something, beyond that, right? Maybe if I'm reading about baseball, the principle is going to be sports. Maybe if I'm reading about, I don't know, opera, the principle is going to be arts or leisure, whatever. But you get it, this never changes. So understanding the issue informs you about how to read the bloody law. Because now I know what they're going to do. They're going to give me an example, and they want to see if my intelligence can walk that up the ladder to the principle. Oh, son of a bitch! That's what I have to do in law school. That's what we just did at the beginning of this session, which is okay. If your example is overturn Dobbs because it's inconsistent with precedent. Oh, well, okay. Well, I have your example, but now I also have a principle I can tether you to, right? So what I have here about principles is if the principle is in the argument, right? The argument's the rule. If the principle's in the argument, you're going from the general to the specific. In other words, if the principle was in the argument, right, then you would be talking about appliances in the argument. And if they want an illustration of the principle, right, and you're talking about appliances, then the answer is going to be something like refrigerator. So you're either going from the general to the specific, right, which means the principle's in the argument, or you're going from the specific to the general, which means when you're reading it, you're reading about the refrigerator. So what I'm saying here is this is law school stock. There isn't a class in law school that's not going to make you do this. You're going to go in week one, you're going to walk into contracts class. And the principle is understanding what an offer is. And then you're going to have examples of what is an offer and what is not an offer. You're going to have the principle of, well, what is acceptance? What does acceptance mean? And then you're going to have examples of acceptance that is valid and acceptance that's not. So I can take you through every single class in law school, and the way you learn is the bloody same, which is you learn by letting examples, which are made to help you, inform you as to the principles, which is really is the intelligence you need. So on this test, lo and behold, you got to say, okay, is the principle in the argument or is the principle in the answer choice? And they'll tell you, right? So here they tell you which one of the following principles. So they're referring to the answer choices. So I'm going to go from the specific to the general. Okay. And the wording, they don't really change the wording in terms of how do you identify it, right? Well, in the issue, it's going to say principle or generalization or preposition. Here's an example. So if you want an example, you go to prep test 78. The sections may have changed now. Because when I did this, there was no law hub, but this will be the first logical reasoning section. So I think actually this one will stay the same, but there's an example there of a principal issue. And then down here basically is what I just said. So this is this, when you get a principal issue, you can look at this, just refresh your recollection. Here's what they want me to do. And now you say, so let me just try this. So I'll just read this out loud. Is everybody okay that the issue wants us to identify a principle? Talk to me, come on.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so now I'm going to read the argument, which is the rule, but I'm reading it to because I know what they've got to do. They've got to walk it up the ladder. Oh, okay. And I'm going to read textually. So here's how I would read it. Just bear with me. Okay. It says here that a treat training consists of rewarding dogs with edible treats whenever they respond appropriately to commands. I stop. I got it. There's a period there. Okay. So I understand what they basically gave me a definition of treat training. And that means I give Shelby a treat whenever Shelby does what I request. Next sentence. Most dogs will quickly learn what they need to do to receive a treat. Okay. So this appears to be an effective training method. You stop. Okay. It usually works. So it appears now, remember it says it appears to be, right? Not that it is. But treat training appears to be effective method. But the next word is however. So however is going to say to me, well, maybe not all the time. So this is the textual stuff. You're reading this way. You're not speed reading this fast. However, most dogs who have been treat trained will not obey commands unless they are shown a treat. And there's a whole sentence there, right? It's a son of a bitch. Now, the only way I can get Shelby to respond is by having the treat. That's not going to be effective when there's an emergency. Okay. Next sentence. Since you cannot always have treats on hand, you should instead use praise and verbal correction to train your dog. Got it. Now, the final sentence in that argument constitutes the argument's conclusion. So as I read this, it's a recommendation. It's basically the recommendation on part of the writer is say, because there's a drawback to treat training, right? Really what you should do here is use verbal commands. And you stop and say, so whatever the answer has broad, it has to walk that up a ladder. But is everybody okay with, what I would walk away with is, as a principle, would it be fair to say that verbal commands are something you have available all the time?
Yes.
Yes.
And would it be fair to say we've actually been informed that there are times you may not have a treat?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and this is not what you would do. I mean, but if you walk that up the ladder, then isn't the principle that when you're training, and it wouldn't have to be a dog, right? Because it's not going to just be a pet or an animal, right? Wouldn't the principle be there that when I'm training an animal, I mean, they can repeat dog, right? But it probably makes sense to have something that's always available than something that's sometimes available.
Yes.
Okay, so you don't have to do that work on the exam. What I'm saying is that's the beauty of this, right? That you're preparing to execute. There are three phases in all of this, right? There's preparation, which is what you are now. This is just preparation. You're not executing. Then we'll begin to merge the two. We'll prepare to execute. That's where we start working with time. And then the third phase is you're executing. But when you're preparing, you're not executing. So you get to practice this. So what I want to do is practice this often enough, right? So that when I'm taking the test, I have a sense of what the answer has to look like. Not the exact words, just what. So let's look together and see what we think the answer is. So A says that if this were the principle, it would help justify that reasoning. And A says, the more quickly a dog learns to respond to a stimulus, the more likely it is that the owner will continue to use that stimulus. I don't get that at all. Not based on the reasoning that I've engaged in. I just don't get that at all. Not what it's about. B, the more often a dog is given a stimulus, the more likely it is the dog will obey its owner's command, even when the owner does not provide that stimulus.
No.
No.
That actually contradicts the argument,
Yes.
right? So again, it's about not bringing in real life. It's not about you and your dog. C, a dog should be trained by the method that results in a high obedience rate in at least some circumstances.
No.
No.
It's just not helping me. D, a dog should be trained to respond to a stimulus that its owner can supply in all situations.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm out of here. Now we'll talk about this, but I'm gone. I'm not looking at E. I mean, I will now, right? But what you want to do, because it's a psychometric test, they're not giving you enough time,
Gotcha.
right? And that all depends on how one uses time. So if you're using the process of elimination, stop it. There are occasions for it.
Dog should be trained by a method that results in high obedience, right? And at least some.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't think you could hear me. I was just reading C.
Oh.
I looked at C. I know D was correct, but I looked at D like, So like in that situation, I can just read D and then compare it to see which one is better.
Yes, that's fine. But yeah, to me, C doesn't, if what you want to do is you want to leave the argument with a grounded sense of where they have to go. Right. So in other words, when I left that argument, which is what IRAC does, this is the applicant. In other words, we have the issue, right? The issue is identify principle. And we have the rule. The rule's the argument. The A in IRAC is apply them while you're reading the argument. That's the reading textually stuff, right? And so when you leave an argument, you want something up here. So the something up here for me is, well, if you're saying use the verbal commands, then yeah, that makes sense because they're always available. So C just doesn't do that at all. C doesn't address the specifics. So C is fine as a general statement.
Right.
not as a principle. Whereas D is there. And what you're going to work up to, you don't have to be there now, but what you're going to work up to is when the answer choice reflects what your mind has produced, you're going to whack the mole and get your ass out of there. Now, that will come with time, but that's how time becomes your friend, because there are tons of people who are committed to reading every answer choice on this test. And all that's going to do is make sure that you run out of time.
Right.
Okay, and E says a dog should, again, I would not be reading E, but it says a dog should not be trained by a method that has not proven to be effective for any other dogs. I have no, the only reason I would pick E is because there was no F. I mean, why would you pick E? It's not. So here, what I'm saying is to check, what I'm saying here is when you do this, right? I say, okay, let me see what the issue is. So the issue is a principle. Then you're going to go to these notes. Come down here where it says principle. Just spend a little time with this, right? Now come back and answer it. And then when we return next week, we're going to be able to go over all of this. So is everybody getting, is everybody okay that choice D on number 1 is the answer and understand why it's the answer?
Yes.
Yes.
How much memorization is involved in that?
None.
Bingo. I mean, it's a whole different ball of wax. Let me go to number 2. Again, we start with the issue, right? These issues never, ever, ever, ever change. You're going to have to weaken arguments. And so I look at number 2, says, which one, if true, which one following if true, most weakens the argument? Oh, okay. And more specifically, the archaeologist. So if there's more than one voice, the only voice I care about to weaken is the archaeologist. I say, okay, so, and here we have at the very top of the page, strengthening and weakening, right? So you'd come and you'd read this. And I'm not going to read that now because I'm going to, but here are some examples of it. Okay, but my mind is set. I'm going to understand what the archaeologist said, and I'm going to make it less likely. Okay, and I'm going to read textually. For 2,000 years, the ancient Sumerians depended on irrigation to sustain the agriculture that fed their civilization, period, you stop. Okay, so this is a bunch of years ago, the ancient Sumerians, they depended on irrigation to sustain agriculture that fed, God, irrigation is a big deal. Next sentence, but eventually irrigation built up in the soil, toxic levels of salt and other impurities left behind when water evaporates. So you stop. So wouldn't it be fair to say that the thing they depend on, which is irrigation, ends up being a problem because it's affecting the soil and causing the soil to become toxic?
Yes.
Okay. When its soil became unable to support agriculture, Sumerian civilization collapsed. So I finished the first 3 sentences and I get it, right? They depend on irrigation. The irrigation has this effect that's really nasty. And now I'm told because of that, they couldn't irrigate and their civilization collapsed. Okay, next. A similar fate is thus likely to befall modern civilizations that continue to rely heavily on irrigation for agriculture. So stop. The conclusion is the final sentence. The first 3 sentences, the role in the argument of the first 3 sentences is to provide facts. First fact had to do with an ancient Sumerian culture and irrigation. And the second fact had to do with the negative consequence of that irrigation. The third fact had to do with the decline of the civilization because of that. And the final sentence was, hey, Chuckles, you know what? You're toast too. So I've been told to weaken this. So I'm going to weaken the conclusion that the modern civilization is also likely to fall victim to the toxic levels that come from irrigation. Okay. So do you think, can you imagine for a moment that modern civilizations would have ways of dealing with the toxic buildup that the ancient Sumerians did not have?
Yes.
Don't you think that's going to be the answer?
Yes. Or at least
That's how you,
do it, changing circumstances.
Yes.
yeah, yeah. You're comparing an ancient culture to a modern culture, and you're telling me to weaken the argument. Okay, so now let's see. But I'm not overthinking it. I'm reading it carefully. I'm reading it once. I've read it for its parts, so I know where the conclusion is. Okay. A, do I weaken this argument, which again is that a similar fate awaits us? That's the argument. Most modern civilizations could not feed themselves through agriculture without relying heavily on irrigation. Well, no, because it's not about that, right? It's about, is there some way we could keep the soil buildup from being toxic? B, factors unrelated to the use of irrigation would probably have caused the Sumerian civilization to collapse sooner or later.
No.
No.
That's got nothing to do with the argument's conclusion, right? Which is, it's not about the Sumerians, it's about what it implies. What do you infer will happen to the modern folks from what happened back in Sumeria? See, many modern farmers use irrigation techniques that avoid the buildup of salts and other toxic impurities in the soil. Would that weaken this argument?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Good night, lights out, I'm gone. Now, again, it is absolutely theoretically possible that D or E could even be more fatal. But it's really hard for me to imagine it could be more fatal. And here I do take into account the position of this. There's number two. So while it could be among the most difficult questions on the test, it's very, very unlikely. And what I formed in my mind is what choice C presents me with. So don't worry about pulling the trigger right now. But you get what I'm getting, that what IRAC is having you do is have something in your mind before you ever look at the answer choices. You know what I'm saying? So that the answer choices are confirming your own intellectual product. And to, oh yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, I didn't have those words, but yeah, that's what I thought. You do that, and on the parts of the test, and 40% of this test is really not difficult. About 40% of the test is straightforward. And if you do this method, that 40% will be, to me, this is not difficult. This question number two is not, for me, it's not. Let me then look at, but again, to weaken it, you have to focus on what was the conclusion. And the conclusion had to do with the modern folks, right? Not with the ancient Sumerians. D, many modern civilizations do not rely to any significant extent on irrigation. Well, but that's, that's separate from the argument's conclusion, which is that those who do rely on irrigation are screwed. And E, the soil of ancient Sumeria already contains some toxic salts and other impurities before the Sumerians started using irrigation for agriculture. Okay.
Doesn't that attack the premise instead of the conclusion?
Yes. Yep. That's absolutely correct. It does attack the premise. So is everybody okay with C as the answer? Is there any, well, let me rephrase it. Anybody not okay? Okay. And again, what I'm trying to get to you is the technique, right? So you're open, because then if you do this, like if you do this on prep test 72 and you go through section 2, and if you want to, and just get used to this. There's nothing you have to do for next week. But if you go through these 20 these 26 questions in section 2. And if you had the opportunity to go through section 3, you would be well rewarded. No time. And then you're saying, let me just do this. Okay, let me try question number 3. And the issue here is to strengthen an argument. So nobody's hiding anything. Nobody's trying to mess you up. Nobody on the planet like who's ever going to be a lawyer who doesn't understand you have to strengthen arguments to become a lawyer. That's like, whoa. So it's not, don't make this test something it's not. It's not this behemoth, this scary beast that's going to come and grab you from behind. It just says, show me you can reason this way. Oh, okay, I can do that. So now I want to strengthen an argument. So we'd be in the same little box area up here and on that. And then, what I'm saying is you build on this, right? By then saying, okay, I can go back to prep test 19 and just work on one issue at a time. So I can identify arguments where they're saying to me, weaken it, right? Take myself off the clock and just get good at weakening arguments. Right? Maybe I'll do 10 of them and I'll switch over to strengthening. Maybe I'll do 10 of those and switch over to principles. And the time you're putting in, the familiarity you're picking, it's what people don't do. They want shortcuts. They want tricks. I want to compete with that person, actually, because I'm going to crush him. I don't have to be any smarter. I'll just be more informed. So here I want to strengthen, which now, again, my mindset is, cool. Right, this is my client. Cool. Right, so see what we got. I want to know what they say, and then I want to lend support to it. So it's a researcher, and that's who I'm strengthening the research. He's my good guy. Dinosaur fossils come in various forms, including mineralized bones and tracks in dried mud flats. Now, for me, that's really kind of odd, knowing nothing about this, right? But I never thought of fossils as tracks in dried mud flats. So that's what this reading textually does. And who knew? I mean, I didn't know. That's the fossil. I thought a fossil was the bone. But this is telling me the fossil is including bones and the tracks. Okay, if you say so. I mean, I don't know. So I got my first sentence, and now I know those are the forms that the fossils come in. However, mineralized dinosaur bones and dinosaur tracks in dried mud are rarely found together. Okay. So let me just process this for a second, right? So they're both fossils, the tracks and the bones. You think you'd find them together, right? Animal dies, the tracks there, and the bones go, okay. So we're not finding that. Okay. And here comes, which this seems like a conclusion that's coming. This isn't surprising, but it is to me. So you tell me what's not surprising. This isn't surprising. Because creatures that scavenge dinosaur carcasses most likely frequented the mud flats to find food. So for me, I'm slowing down on this one. I get it. I want to read it the second time, and that's okay. And it is, so the reason we're not finding the bones with the tracks, which is what I would expect, according to the researcher, is that the animals that are scavenging the dinosaurs went to the mud flats to find food. Okay, so then I see this, like, I don't know, meerkat or something, right? And the meerkat's running over, and there's dinner, right? And we're having Tyrannosaurus leg tonight. I mean, there's nothing like Tyrannosaurus leg, and it's right there in the old footpath. So to strengthen this argument, doesn't it seem like an explanation would be the meerkat picks up whatever the leg and moves it somewhere else and eats it or stores it? Wouldn't that put the bone in a different place from the footprint?
Yes.
So practice this, because then something like that would strengthen this argument. Now, if you come up with nothing, that's okay, then go to the answer choices. But I want to strengthen the argument that it isn't surprising that we found the bone in a place other than where we found the track. Okay. A, dinosaur tracks are also found in locations other than mudflats. But that's not about this argument. This argument has to do with mudflats and the bones. So, B, scavengers commonly drag a carcass away from the site where it was found.
Yes.
I mean, I would be pretty much out of here. I mean, we're certainly going to keep reading, but does B make sense? Would B be the explanation for why the carcass is not in the same place as the imprint of the foot? Talk
Yes.
to me.
Yes.
And how much law do you have to know to do this?
Just
No.
sense kind of.
No, you just have to think like a lawyer, but you don't have to know any law. That's not the purpose of the test. Then the test would advantage people. Because those people who would knowledge of the content of the law would be at an advantage. You don't have to know a damn thing about the content of the law. So B to me be a very strong answer. And C, researchers have found more fossil dinosaur tracks than fossil dinosaur bones. I don't see how that helps. D, the dinosaur fossils, other than mineralized bones or tracks in dried mud flats, are quite common. That's got nothing to do with why the bones are not in the mud flats. And it takes longer for a bone to mineralize than it takes for tracks to dry in mud flats. And again, if you're picking E, you're just, you're not getting it. So again, what I want you to note, again, this is way, way too early for you guys to be pulling the trigger. But do you see how much time you would save if you had a high degree of confidence in B?
Yes.
Didn't doubt yourself, right? Yeah, right. As opposed to what percent of test takers keep reading because they have been told, and not incorrectly, but they have been told that whenever you weaken or strengthen an argument, there could always be something to weaken it more. And there could always be something to strengthen it more. That's the counter argument. And I agree with that. There could always be. But if you're familiar with the test, and the only thing that would prevent you from being familiar with the test is your own effort, because you now have access to every test from Prep Test 19. So what if in your practice, on questions that are assigned low numbers, where it is to weaken or strengthen, you see an answer that makes all the sense in the world and you pick it and you keep getting them right. So does answer choice B make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so
Yes.
we'll do one more and then I'll, but you're kind of getting the feel for what I want you to be doing.
Yes.
Does it make sense? Does it make
It does
sense?
make sense. Yes, it does make sense.
Okay. So we'll just start question number 4 and then we'll wrap this up. Okay. So now the issue here, again, you're always reading the issue first because that's how it influences how I read the argument. Which one of the following most accurately expresses the conclusion drawn in the argument? Okay, so this is the conclusion. Let's see what we have here. So we say, oh, where did Peter write anything about conclusions? Oh, there they are, right here. Right, so that was this little section here. And more specifically, this is the main conclusion. Okay. Okay, so there's another example of this Prep Test 78, section 3, question number 18. And all I'm looking for here is what's the thing being explained? So remember, the conclusion can be anywhere in the argument, right? But what a conclusion always does is It is being explained. When the explaining is taking place, that's the reasoning. Okay, so let's see. So you can almost see the conclusion as the, generally speaking, not always, but generally speaking, as the broader statement, right? And then the evidence kind of like making sense of that broader statement. Okay, so we have here, not much here. Electric stovetop burners would cause fewer fires if their highest temperature were limited to 350 degrees C, centigrade. Okay, so stop. Now, I want to just draw your attention to the expression would cause. Doesn't that sound like it's a prediction?
Yes.
A would cause or would bring about. Doesn't that sound like a prediction?
Yes.
So when you make a prediction, when you predict something as a lawyer, don't you think you're bound to provide evidence in support of that prediction or outcome?
Yes.
So it should be electrical stove burners causes few fires versus than wood, but that's not what it states, correct?
Run that by me one more time.
I was saying instead of it saying would, if we wanted it to be true, it would have to say causes few fires.
Correct. If you take the word would out, it changes this for sure. And what I'm trying to do is this is all about words, Aisha. It's such an interesting test because I mean, for good or for ill, my life has become all about words. And so when I see would cause, it's like me advising a client that, if you take path A, well, if you take path A, it would cause you to be convicted. That's a prediction. My client's going to send me why. So let's just focus on, if it's a prediction, it's the conclusion. And so you say to me, these burners would cause fewer fires if they were limited to 662 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, so I want to say, why? Why are you saying that? Show me, prove it. Next sentence. I'm sorry, which provides more than enough heat for efficient and effective cooking. Okay, so they would cause fewer fires if you limit them to 662. And then they say, because 662 provides more than enough heat for efficient and effective cooking. Got it. Next sentence. The lowest temperature at which cooking oil and most fibers ignite is 307, and it goes well above 700 degrees. So if I take this together, I say, okay, the burners would cause fewer fires, which is a prediction, if they're limited to 350 centigrade. Then you explain to me which provides more than enough heat for efficient and effective cooking. So that's fine. And then you go on to say the lowest temperature at which cooking oil and most common fibers ignite is 387 degrees. Okay. So if you limit it to 350, they can never catch fire, right? Because it has to get to 387. So I don't know about you, but the conclusion to me is the very first sentence, where they actually have the option of putting in the entire first sentence, or they can just put in the first clause in the first sentence. Okay. A. Electric stovetop burners would cause fewer fires if their highest temperature were limited to 350 degrees Celsius. How does that sound?
Yes.
That's it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So again, you're going to keep at it now, but you want to get to a point somewhere down the road where you have the confidence. Don't you think it'd be hard being a lawyer if you never had confidence in yourself?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, so you got to work to get there, right? You don't want to be cavalier. But what are my other choices here? B, a maximum temperature of 350 provides more than enough heat for efficient and effective cooking. Well, that's not what this is about. It's about the fires, not effective and efficient cooking. C, the lowest temperature for burning is 387, but that's a fact in support of the argument's conclusion that we should limit the maximum temperature at 350. So that's in the argument, but it's in the argument, not as the argument's conclusion, right? But as a fact in support of the argument's conclusion. Electric burners go well above, again, that's a fact in there, but a fact in support of the argument's conclusion, or just the fact is helpful. And E, the stovetop burners cause fires because they go well above 700. That's not the argument's conclusion. This is about, we're going to cause fewer fires if we limit it. So this again goes to, you now look for, and it's a really good place to start actually in briefing, main conclusion issues, because it forces you to focus on role in the argument. So when you're looking for the main conclusion, well, that's the role in the argument of those words. It's the argument's main conclusion. So role in the argument is a separate issue you have to deal with. So by preparing with main conclusion issues, it will introduce you to role in the argument. Okay. Okay, so you get the feel for what I have in mind.
Yes.
All right. I want to show you one other thing, which is, just stop this share. And don't go crazy. Again, it's week one. Just get your feet wet. Just become familiar with the other resources that are there and that you may find them helpful. So just get in there, at least watch the old, some of the old class video. Get in there and just look at the analytical library. Get in there and look at the on deck videos, which are logical reasoning, right? Don't worry about how much you have to do. You've got your life to do it. Let me just stop this share. And let me share this. Okay. And again, I'll send this along. All I've done here, this is what I'm saying, there are two parts to this, right? One part is you stick with what we're doing here, right? So insofar, nobody has to do anything, but insofar that you want to work through prep test 72, I'll go over anything you want to go over in the logical reasoning next week. This is what I'm saying. Say we were working today, so we hit principle, we hit weakening, we hit strengthening, and we hit main conclusion. So if you were to go back here to, this is prep test 19, section 2. This is from Law Hub, right? And you would say, well, did I have examples of these in this test? And question number 17 here would have been a conclusion issue. Question number 3 here was a conclusion issue. When I have the word necessary, those are assumptions. So if I have necessary, that was a necessary assumption. But what I'm saying is take an issue and you fill this in over time. So if you want to work on the conclusion issue, well, you would have one there at question number 3, question number 17. And again, you're referring to the notes that I have. If I go further down, see over here, you get to strengthening, weakening, weakening, strengthening. So it's an opportunity to work on one issue at a time. So if you were working on the strengthening issues and you went just to prep test 19, don't go crazy, but you just went to prep test 19. Then according to my notes, you're going to find examples of strengthening in section 3 and question 15, question 7, and I don't know if there are any more up here. No, there are not, but there are four weakenings here, right? There's a weakening in section 2 and question 4. And you build this, and then when you get to section 3, right? There's a weakening on 9, a weakening on 10, and a weakening on 26. And so you get that this gradually gets filled in over time. One issue at a time, right? And it's just methodical. It's just take 5 exams. Say, in other words, don't go crazy. So take whatever number you want, but the number 5 comes to my mind. So you would do 19. I think they're missing prep test 20, but take the first 5 exams. Take one issue. Do the spreadsheet where you simply have, it's always section 2 and section 3 for logical reasoning on Law Hub. It's always 2 and 3. So you just create the template, right? So you'll have section, exam 19, 2 and 3. 21, 2 and 3, 22, 2 and 3. So you create the template, allow for however many questions are in a given section, pick one issue and just begin to fill it in. And just take your time. And there's a lot to cover. All right. So I'll stop this share.
So where can we find that sheet? You said it was on Law Hub.
I'm sorry?
Where can we find that sheet you just pulled up? Was that your personal sheet or from Law Hub?
When you say the sheet, mean the
The one you just
spreadsheet?
shared. Yes.
I'm gonna send that to you. That's mine.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Yeah.
Peter,
Yes, Mariel.
I wanted to know where could we access the videos that you were talking about? Because I was trying to locate them and it only shows me like videos, but I think you're like in a classroom.
Yes, well, those are the class videos. There are 3 now. There's the class videos. And for you to have gotten to the class videos, you had to go to the website. You
Right.
went to classes you're registered for, and then you would have clicked on, either the standalone or the pipeline class, and they took you to the videos. Well, when you go back there, so you go back to that same place, courses you're registered for,
Right.
but you don't click on the pipeline or the standalone course. You click on the analytical reasoning library or the logical reasoning library, which they will both be there.
Oh, okay, I see.
Okay. So the 3 separate sources, but in one place.
Oh, okay. All right.
And if you have any problems, let me know during the week.
Okay.
But it's really, I think you all have a sense for where I'm going with this. It can be a very long journey. It doesn't have to be. But not everybody's a lawyer, and not everybody's supposed to be a lawyer. And that's okay. A lot of things that I'm not, and a lot of things I'm not supposed to be. But thankfully, I've got to do the thing I want to do. So I'll send you that stuff. I'd say for now, just if you can, if you get the time, focus on prep test 72, the logical reasoning. We'll go over that. Next week, I certainly will begin the conversation on analytical reasoning. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, I have to go to work. So I thought that was you ending off. So I do have to go
No,
to work.
it is. So go ahead. Sorry, no, get to work, Julie. Get
Okay,
to
thank
work.
you. Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
I am leaving to Mr. Peter. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I'm about to sign off. You all know what I want you to do, yes?
Yes.
Just to
Have at it.
Mr. Peter, can you hear me?
Yes, go. Yep.
So just do prep test 72, just the LR, just do one by one, right? Using what you're going to send us as far as like how to attack each logical reasoning question, or how to
and feel free to go past that. Feel free, absolutely encourage you to go back to, prep test 19 and say, let me start this spreadsheet thing. And, just based on what we did today, let me work on arguments where I have to weaken them, arguments where I have to strengthen them, arguments where there are principles, arguments where there are main conclusions. And again, just take yourself off the clock and just understand your task is going to be identical to these tests. I promise you, you're going to walk in there and not a damn thing's going to change. You can either weaken and strengthen an argument or you can't. Or you can learn to do it and you won't. So yes, the narrow issue is, or Simon, if you will, right? 72, section 2 and section 3, which would both be logical reasoning. And then we can just discuss whatever's not clear. And there'll be a bunch of stuff not clear because there's a bunch of stuff that's really hard. So really don't go crazy. The more approachable material will have lower numbers assigned to it, right? So if you're working on number 18 and it's parallel reasoning and you don't have a clue what it is, don't worry about it. I mean, you can ask me and I'll try to figure it out. But that's the purpose of this is not to get beat up. The purpose of this is to get the issue, get command of the issue. How do I weaken an argument? How do I get good at weakening arguments? Because I'm going to have to do it. How do I get good at spotting the conclusion? Because I'm going to have to do it. And not for nothing, but you can't be a lawyer without doing this stuff. So again, it's not about squeezing, every drop out of the lemon. Leave some stuff on the table that you're struggling with. And insofar that I believe it's helpful, I'll cover it during a class, but I may say to you, at this stage, it's really not that helpful. We're in AA ball, AAA ball. We're not in the majors yet. Let's just get good at where we are and work our way up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Well then, there's nothing further. Thank you all for being here. Now, remember that at some point this week, I'll probably build this week. So if there are any questions about that, just reach out to me via email or phone. With that, you must all go away now.
Thank you.
Have a weekend.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful Saturday. Go out and kick its ass. And the plan is I'll see you next week.
Okay.
See you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.